This is going to be a yap video where I just yap. It's time for me once again to trailblaze and defend an item that is seemingly indefensible, the Antler Shield. I think 90% of the comments on the last video, the state of Risk of Rain 2, going over the roadmap for Secret of the Storm, it's like 90% people calling me dumb, stupid, and stinky for having that opinion on Antler Shield, which my opinion is they were a good item. We shouldn't change them into movement speed items. I shall now be defending this. I'll try to timestamp everything. So the first argument we're going to address is the fact that the Antler Shield is a bad item. This is true. Everybody knows it's a bad item, but it's not bad because the item effect itself is bad. It's bad because the numbers are terrible. I don't know why they have a 50% chance that you will do 10% of the damage that enemies deal to you, and then only give it 5% increased chance for every stack plus 10% damage per stack, and it takes 11 stacks to have a 100% chance of proccing that item. That's really bad. Those numbers are terrible. I don't know why they have them, and honestly, I wish that they would just make it 100% from the first stack. So I'm not going to go ahead and say that the Antler Shield is a good item right now. I put it in D tier in my damn tier list video, which you should go check that out. So obviously I don't think it's good now. I just think that it could use buffs on the numbers, or it could do something like give a little bit of armor, like 2.5 armor or something, while also increasing the value of everything else. Oh, and a brief introduction into how Antler Shield works. So the damage that Antler Shield does is actually calculated before the damage reduction. So if an enemy hit you with 1,000 damage, but you had 99.9% damage reduction, and you only took 1 damage, Antler Shield would reflect 1,000 damage, meaning that for survivors with high armor, or if you already have armor through rose bucklers or other forms, Antler Shield is good. On top of that, Antler Shield will get more damage from things like crowbar or delicate watches or anything that increases your damage. I think this is critically missed information from everybody who complains about the Antler Shield. Almost every time I see it brought up, people are using it in a vacuum. Call me Dyson. No sphere. So let's illuminate with an example. Let's say an enemy does 1,000 damage to you. You can crit with Antler Shield, so that's already 2,000 damage. As I'm recording this, I'm just now realizing I'm not sure how damage is calculated in Risk of Rain 2 or what comes first. But let's just say, for sake of pretending, that we have a crowbar as well, and that gets added on. That should make it 3,500 damage, if I'm doing my math correctly. This is off the top of the dome, don't hate me. And since Antler Shield can proc, that can also proc an ATG, which will do 300% of that damage. So in this hypothetical, the Antler Shield is doing over 10,000 damage. A lot of people like to use the fact that enemies have high HP pools and high damage compared to survivors that have lower damage and lower HP. So getting hit is always bad, but this is also a benefit in the Antler Shield's favor because most survivors aren't going to be able to do 1,000 damage in a single hit, making all the damage multipliers that you can add on top of it, armor piercing rounds, ATGs, etc., all really good with Antler Shield. Now, is this a niche scenario, and is this probably not going to work on survivors like Huntress? Yes, you are correct about that. There's nothing wrong with niche items or items that don't work on certain survivors, a la backup magazine on Rex. All right, next argument, razor wire exists. It's not a unique item. First of all, the elusive antlers is just a movement speed item. We have movement speed items. What kind of argument is that? You can't simultaneously be like, oh yeah, we need more movement speed items, but also be like, actually, Antler Shield is not unique because razor wire exists, and that's basically the same thing, even though they're entirely different. Is Cautious Slug the same as Bustling Fungus because they both heal you? I'll be bringing up razor wire again later, but I just want to say, completely different item. And if you disagree and you think they're both the same item, then you have to agree that Goat Hoof, Mocha, and what's the other one? Coca-Cola? What's the energy drink are the same item. Dumb argument. Next. Speaking of movement speed items and the fact that there's a diluted item pool, it's harder to get movement speed now. Who gives a fuck? Not only is this a video game, it's also a paid DLC. We get it. Some people want to min-max fucking everything in video games, all right? I'm gonna say you're the fall of video games. Congratulations, you have defeated fun.
Well, actually, R&D, ever since the DLC added all these items and not a single one of them was a movement speed item, there has been a 15% decrease in the amount of movement speed items I can get every run, which equates to roughly a 20-second delay in every stage. Therefore, they have to add at least 0.1 movement speed items for every single other item they add, or my runs will be in shambles.
I don't care. That's what you guys sound like. Play command, disable the DLC, scrap the items. Crazy how Hopu actually added a scrapper and printers to the game, and I still hear people complaining about their items. And again, this is a DLC. I don't understand how people don't get that. Of all the places you could add a unique mechanic, a DLC would be it. I cut this part out of the other video because I was yapping a little too long. I'm gonna be honest, I was a yapper. It was like a 50-minute video plus. But towards the end, I was talking about how you could easily theme these DLCs, which would not only make it better from like an entertainment standpoint, lore, gameplay, etc., but it could also guide your balancing decisions, and make it so you don't have to necessarily cater to the whims of everybody that comes through. An example would be a Nukahana's themed DLC. Probably more heavy on the healing items and healing in general, while also fleshing out the lore and having unique environments that are only available in that DLC. If you didn't like that, then you wouldn't have to buy the DLC. You could say, not for me. And that's fine, because it's the DLC and you're paying for it. I love the Fallout games, but there are a lot of DLCs that I just didn't enjoy. The mechanics weren't as fun. RimWorld, another one of my favorite games to play, includes so many different unique mechanics to each DLC that it almost feels overwhelming to have all of them. And guess what? You can disable it just like you can in Risk of Rain 2. Looping this back around, let's get back to the main argument at hand here. Okay, I went off on a little tangent. So Katoa, we don't need to add movement speed items just for the fuck of it. Risk of Rain 2 is not a competitive game. I'm not playing against other players, except when my friend picks up a glowing meteorite. Then I guess I would need some more elusive antlers, huh? Wow, that really changed my mind. Next argument. We shouldn't be incentivizing people getting hit, or whatever the hell that argument is that I've seen thrown around a couple times. Once again, I have to say, this isn't competitive. No one's watching you play the game, except me. I'm always behind you. Under your bed. You should scrap that item. That wasn't a good one. But seriously, I thought we were all joking about the don't get hit meme. I thought that was a joke we were all in on, that, you know, when someone gets hit, haha, just don't get hit. Forehead, haha, nice delicate watches, they're broken. But some of you were taking that seriously? You're allowed to get hit, you're allowed to take damage, and you're also allowed to play the game however the hell you want. I got a bad news alert for everyone here who plays Eclipse. The game wasn't balanced around Eclipse. Hopu has said this. It's a challenge mode. It's supposed to be a challenge. There's still a lot of people who like to run command and drizzle and just have weird builds. We don't need to be telling people, oh man, you don't want to set bad habits. Later in your Risk of Rain 2 career, that's going to be a bad habit. You're going to have to break out of it. No! It's a video game! On top of this, people are going to get hit by things, okay? You're going to take damage somehow. Risk of Rain 2 isn't a game that's so difficult you're expected to die over and over and over and over again. You have armor, you have HP, there are tanky survivors, there are defensive items. Are we going to try to remove Rose Buckler because you just shouldn't get hit in the first place? Why are we trying to incentivize being hit? No! Multi has a special ability called Power Mode that reduces his movement speed to a near crawl, but gives him 100 armor, which is about 50% damage reduction. Wow, it would be really nice if I decided to play multi and use power mode, and then there was an item that reflected damage, but it only reflected the damage before the reduction. So even if I took a lot of damage, I have 50% damage reduction and it's still gonna reflect the full amount. But no, we shouldn't do that because we don't want to incentivize being hit. Because you're playing the game wrong if you get hit. No, that's stupid. And you don't even believe it because there are plenty of items and survivors in the game that completely contradict that statement. And even if this argument worked, somehow I rationalize it in my head, I don't know how I would do it. I don't give a fuck because I want to give my engineer turrets little antler ornaments. Okay, next argument. Antler Shield doesn't work with any other items. There's no synergies, blah, 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 something like that. I don't know. First of all, already described, if you have an Antler Shield plus all these other damage items, you're increasing the amount of damage the Antler Shield does by a tremendous amount. Even more so than if you were a simple commando who didn't do any damage, you did like 10 damage a shot. And here comes a big, beefy Elder Lemurian to smack you for 1,000 damage. All your other damage items are going to increase the amount of damage that fireball does to you, and all of your armor is going to reduce the amount of damage that fireball does to you. But just using the DLC, the Seekers of the Storm DLC, we already have Synergy with Warped Echo, which will still give you the same amount of damage, but you'll be able to double the chance you proc an item. You have Growth Nectar, Long-Standing Solitude, Prayer Beads, all of these things that make you even tankier, a Noxious Thorn, which applies more debuffs as you're getting hit, and the Dorito Chip to teleport you away if you ever get in danger. I mean, there's a lot of synergies already off the top of my head. We've got the Rose Buckler, we've got the Repulsion Armor, we've got the Razor Wire, which just increases the damage that you do. We have Medkit, we have Infusion, we have Bison Steak, we have Chronic Expansion, which will keep you in combat if you're getting hit by other enemies, which don't make me go on another rant about the fact that people were complaining that Chronic Expansion, an item that gives you infinite damage, is too hard to use. Come on. You don't have to always use the Chronic Expansion. You don't have to hold the damage every single time. It's only when you need it. Why would people say this? Antler Shield is good. It has synergies. There are ways you can build around this item. Use your brain. All right, next argument, I want to go over the difference between Razor Wire and Antler Shield a little bit more in depth here, because people are talking out of two sides of their mouth here. Some people say the effect of taking damage is bad, and that's why this item shouldn't exist. But they'll also just say it's a worse Razor Wire. And I get there are multiple people out there saying this, so maybe it's not the same people saying both things, but it's weird. So for starters, the difference between Antler Shield and Razor Wire. 1. Razor Wire deals damage based off of your base damage. This is pretty important. So if you're level 1 on Commando, I think it's like 12 damage. With Razor Wire, you're doing 12 damage to 5 enemies near you. And they have to be in range. The damage itself doesn't increase, only the AoE and the amount of enemies hit by it. For Antler Shield, it does damage based on how much damage you take. It has unlimited range and is only single target. Plus, Razor Wire can work off of damage that you deal to yourself, so Hellfire Tincture, Sojourn, I think, Void Fog, and Fall damage can all work with Razor Wire. Razor Wire also has a 0.5 proc coefficient where the Antler Shield only has 0.3. So already we should be able to see the differences here. Again, to call them the same is like saying Bustling Fungus and Cautious Slug are the same item because they both heal. That doesn't make sense. No, you play around the two items completely differently. If an enemy does 100 damage to you with an Antler Shield, and let's just pretend you have 100% proc, for the sake of argument here, because again, I agree Antler Shield is a terrible item because the numbers are just terrible. I'm just saying it's dumb to rework it into a movement speed item. But an enemy hits you for 100 damage and you have Antler Shield, it's going to reflect 100 damage. If you have a Razor Wire, instead, it's going to reflect, let's pretend you're Commando, you get 14 damage, it's going to reflect roughly 22 damage. I shouldn't have said reflect, but whatever. And also Commando does 12 damage level 1, so I already messed that up. Whatever, we're going forward with this anyway. Razor Wire hits 5 enemies, which means it actually does more damage than Antler Shield in this scenario, and has a higher likelihood to proc. However, let's just change it to 1,000 damage, just to keep the math simple. Guess what? Razor Wire does the exact same amount of damage, but now Antler Shield does 1,000. So what does this mean? This means that Razor Wire benefits you by not only being able to self-inflict damage, so if you're Rex or if you have a Hellfire Tincture, Razor Wire is going to be better, but you're also ideally only taking small little ticks of damage, like from a Blazing Elite or a Grandparent or something like that, because that's the strength of the Razor Wire. Antler Shield, on the other hand, is weaker the less damage enemies do, and stronger the more damage enemies do. Both of these items have synergy with each other because they cover the other one's weakness, but they are not at all the same. But they both do damage if get hit. Congratulations, Lenny. Pet the mouse. All right, so I think I've ranted enough. I think that's about it. I think that's about every argument I saw. I'm sure there's more, and I'm sure I didn't specify things clearly enough in this video that people are going to argue something that I don't even believe, but you know. So to summarize everything so far, I believe, number 1 and most important, Antler Shields do suck and they needed buffed. I just don't think that they should have been reworked into a movement speed item when you have a unique mechanic that would allow you to play the game in a different way in a paid DLC. But no, let's just have another movement speed item because the item pool is diluted. Man, Bustling Fungus sure is a bad item, huh? You have to stand still. You don't stand still in Risk of Rain 2. That's a bad habit. They should remove that and add a movement speed item so the pool is not as diluted. Bison Steak? Why do you need more max HP? That's stupid. You're not supposed to be getting hit. Why would you need more HP? Fireworks and Squid Polyp? Well, I mean, there's no interactables at Mithrix, so we should remove those because you can't use them on the Mithrix fight. Dio's best friend revives you after you die? Don't die, stupid! That's the whole point of the game. What are you doing? Remove that item. We're gonna teach people that dying is okay. What? Okay, I got a little heated again and distracted. Give me a second. I'll cool down. So in summary, I feel like Antler Shield should keep its main mechanic, which is damage reflect, but the numbers should be buffed appropriately. 11 stacks to get 100% damage reflect is a little ridiculous. People saying that the effect isn't unique because Razor Wire exists, I disagree heavily. They are two different items that do different things, and they cover for each other's weaknesses. I don't think we should be worrying about how the item pool is diluted in a paid DLC and using that as an excuse to take an item that was unique and turning it into a generic movement speed item for no other reason other than we just need more movement speed items. I think the argument that you shouldn't be teaching people to get hit because that's a bad habit or goes against how the game is supposed to be played is a silly reason. Once again, we are playing a video game for fun. Having diversity in builds is not a bad thing, especially when it's a DLC you can tick on and off to turn off the items. There's also a command where you can choose the items that you have, and we have scrappers, which means we can delete any items we want and trade them in for other ones. I think saying Antler Shield is bad just in general because of the effect itself is wrong and incorrect. We have Engineer, who he can have it on both of his turrets. So if you place the turrets next to each other, one single fireball from a Lemurian will do double damage to it. Then we have Survivors that have high armor. So for example, Power Mode Multi, where you're probably going to be taking a lot of damage since you have a 60% reduced movement speed, but you have 100 armor, which is 50% damage reduction. Void Fiend Corrupted Mode also has 100 armor, so he's also good with it. Plus, he can heal himself. On top of that, there are a lot of items that you can synergize with the Antler Shield. So to say that the Antler Shield is bad because the effect is bad is simply wrong and just close-minded, really. If you all just wanted to play Temple Run, you should have just said that. And to be honest, Antler Shield isn't really the hill I'm trying to die on. I just find it really sad that as soon as a mechanic that's not inherently increased damage or increased movement speed is added to the game, people just piss and shit themselves. Chronic expansion might be one of the easiest items to use in the game. All you have to do is shoot enemies. And people still complain that that's too difficult and they think that item's bad. I've blue-pilled half of my community on long-standing Solitude being a good item, but there are still people out there kicking and screaming that it's not good, most of whom haven't even picked up the item. And I can almost guarantee you, none of you have tried to use Antler Shield in a positive way. There's way too much Excel sheet on paper bullshit that I'm hearing, and not enough people actually playing the game or having fucking fun. But that's okay, because I'm sure when elusive antlers come out, and we can all move 5% quicker every time we pick up a monster teeth orb or whatever the fuck it does, that's gonna be way more fun. I can't wait to theory craft more builds with that kind of item. Like, maybe I'll pick up an energy drink and goat hooves so I move even faster. Honestly, I just hope the next DLC that Gearbox releases, they change some of these bad survivors like Rex. Doing damage to yourself is kind of stupid. They need to rework him into Commando but better, where it's Commando but all of his skills and abilities and stats are better. I think that's what they should do. And I think they should probably make it so you can only select Commando and better Commando, because I don't want any variety in my game. I just want to be able to make it to Mithrix as quick as possible so I can win the game. Now, if you don't mind me, I'm gonna go perform missionary on my wife for 30 seconds. I only get to do it once a week, so I'm pretty excited. Humble Poor, 123, signing out. Stay safe out there, kids, and wear protection.